This seems to be a story that an actor couldn't turn down.
Yes, what an ego trip to create life. Yeah.
The film seems sort of at the heart of it based on experimentation. So when you're on set and working, did you have the freedom yourselves to experiment with your performances?
I thought you were going to say that I have freedom to experiment with.
With and that as well. It's all research.
Exactly, under the name of research. That I get, well, not really. Bernard films so fast that there really isn't a lot of time to experiment. But of course, I read Shelley's story and Bernard's script. And what's wonderful about the way Bernard Rose works is that he's always faithful to the original material, but somehow he launches it into another setting. So everybody kind of knows what they're doing because you have the original material to do your research with, but it's another world that you're thrown into.
Is research something that you like to do, or do you just like to stay to the script and just resort to what's in the material itself?
I suppose it depends on what I'm researching. You've given me some ideas now. Let's make it all over again. It depends. Every film is slightly different. As far as Dr. Frankenstein creating life, I don't really know where the research would come from. I like the idea of him being this sort of kind of Silicon Valley guy because it kind of modernizes it a little bit. But I suppose the only research in regards to creating life would be to be a parent. Fuck a lot.
Beat that.
Yeah, cut that out. That's. I mean, and in a way, he's trying to create this perfect family with Mrs. Frankenstein, and however twisted that is, we're creating this thing that maybe we can't have children, and he's a little statue of David, and he's perfect. He's exactly what we wanted. So we're like parents. We're proud and we're happy. And there's also that ego thing of where who does he look like? Does he look like you? Does he look like me? And there's all that sort of element to it. And he is perfect, and we're completely overcome until we find a slight blemish, and then we realize that he's not, and that maybe the experiment needs to be reconsidered.
Does that as well for you when this is the conflict which becomes exciting for the actor, and then you get to discover really more and more layers of your character, because really what you've done isn't necessarily right, but you came with the right intentions. Was that something that perhaps
I think that science and mainly science, I don't know about doctors, but mainly science doesn't make that kind of moral judgment. I don't think my character ever saw it as being something wrong, morally speaking. The experiment is not successful because the subject has problems.
This is a modern day working of a classic novel, so what was your inspiration to write the story?
Well, I'd never read the book before, actually, so I mean the short answer is the book, and the film is actually very close to the book and directly quotes it quite a lot, in as much as in the book, the monster, when he narrates his own story, he sounds like Lord Byron or something. He certainly sounds like a romantic poet from the early part of the 19th century, and I think this is something that's always been missing from adaptations, is that he's a very sensitive, educated, very intelligent being. There's nothing stupid about him, and I think actually Karloff did actually convey his intelligence, but you never got the sense of the sort of poetry and the educated qualities that he has in the novel. In the novel he reads Dante and things like that, and so I think I thought that was very interesting that he could have that going on inside but be unable to communicate it, and that was something that we hadn't seen before, and that was actually a very important quality of the book, not just that he is intelligent life, but that he's as intelligent as any human being, and possibly more so, and that the violence is something that that's foisted upon him and that he doesn't understand. And by the time he understands it, he's sullied himself with so much death that he's appalled at himself. And I think that's also a really important part of the tragedy of Frankenstein, is his self-loathing.
The humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he realizes too late that he's been incredibly brutal, because he didn't know what was going on, really, you know.
And with a modern day story, I have no doubt that you're introducing modern day techniques and technology into the story as well. So research wise, was that interesting for you to go and journey through to bring some truth to the story?
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, we're at a moment in history where a lot of these things are about to become really genuinely possible through 3D bioprinting. People are making not just, obviously they're making hands and things and body parts, but they're also making internal organs. And so the idea that you could actually create an entire organic creature is not that difficult to understand. I mean, let's assume it's not possible now, but let's also assume that somebody's working on it, really working on it, not pretend working on it. So I think that it's very interesting to think that that's how it would be more likely to happen. Of course, that doesn't mean you could imbue it with life. You could build a perfect person and they'd still be a corpse. And that's, of course, the mystery of the universe, that we don't know what consciousness is. And that's the great debate of the novel itself, is that, you know, if there is consciousness, then where does it come from? And is it eternal? And how did it get there, you know?
And with regards to the film being all about experimentation, really, is that as a filmmaker on set with your actors, did you allow them to experiment? Was it an environment that you wanted to create, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always like to work in a kind of improvisational manner as well. I hate being too rigid. I hate rehearsing anything. I always like to just shoot the first time anything happens, when it's fresh, because you can always do it a second time, but you can only do it the first time once. And that's always one of the hardest things to do with a movie, is capture that initial impulse and not let the machinery get in the way. I think too often with filmmaking, the DP dominates the set and the machinery dominates the vision, and it stops it being alive, you know.